Hey everyone, welcome to the Unit 3 Part 2 review video. Basically, what I'm about to do is go through all 30 problems on the review and walk my way through them and explain the important parts, maybe even point out some parts that you might want to add to your note card. If you are struggling in this unit, watching this video, doing all of this review is kind of like a Hail Mary pass. This is a way to make sure that you at least understand the basics for the test on Thursday and Friday. So let's start off with complex numbers. This was section 3.6. Basically, you're going to need to be able to add and subtract, multiply, like this, and simplify powers of I, such as these down here. Okay, add, subtract, multiply, simplify powers of I. And then something that kind of goes throughout this whole part of the unit is solving equations. So being able to solve equations that have an I as part of the answer. Okay. So first off, subtracting. Treat it like terms. Okay. One suggestion I do have for you is if it's being subtracted, treat this like a -1 and multiply it to this parentheses first. That's going to make this +4 minus 7i. Changes all the signs. So that way you don't mistakenly miss a subtraction symbol or something. Okay, so right here we have 8 plus 4, that's 12, and 4i minus 7i, that's -3i. So I'm just adding together the numbers that don't have an I first and the numbers that do have an I second. Also, notice how in the directions it says a plus bi form. That means the real number goes first and then the imaginary part. Okay, this isn't -3i plus 12, it's 12 minus 3i. Okay, do pay attention to whether or not there's a symbol in between those parentheses because this could easily get confused with this. The only difference being that there's a minus in between these and not over here. All right, number 2. Again, this is subtracting, so I'm going to treat this like a 1 and distribute that 1. That makes it -9 plus 4i. Now, 9 minus 9 is 0. 4i plus 4i is 8i. Okay, you can write 0 plus 8i if you want. That's fine. I'll go ahead and box my answers for you guys. There you are. All right, number 3 looks a little funky because this isn't in parentheses, but this is. That means you need to take this -3 and multiply it to the parentheses. That's called distributing. That should be something that you are very used to by now. So this is going to become -6, and -3 times -7i is 21i. And then we're going to add our i's together. The -6 is going to stay out front. 4i plus 21i is 25i. And to top off our adding and subtracting, let's do 4 and 5. 4, there's a 4 out front. That was not on purpose, but there's both 4s. So we're going to multiply that. 4 times 2 is 8. 4 times 3i is 12i. And then multiply the -3 times 5 is -15. And -3 times -I is +3i. Because those two negatives make a positive. And then I'm going to add together 8 minus 15, -7, and 12 plus 3 is 15i. Really not that complicated. Just go slow and be careful so you don't make silly mistakes. This next one tends to freak people out. Again, look for that minus sign. You're going to want to subtract or multiply that negative all the way through. That's going to make both of them negative. And then we're going to add all the real parts. Don't let it freak you out that there's 3 of them. You're just simply doing 2 plus 4 minus 7. 2 plus 4 is 6. 6 minus 7 is -1. 3i plus -5i minus 10i. 3i minus 5i is -2i. -2i minus 10i is -12i. This problem, the hardest part about it is that it looks scary. It's not actually that difficult. In fact, look at how much work I showed on these. Not very much. You're fine. Now, 6 through 9 start getting into the multiplication. Notice how there's no number or no symbol in between them. That means you are going to distribute this 6 to both of these and this 4i to both of these. Okay, so 6 times 6 is 36. 6 times negative 4i is negative 24i. Moving on, 4i times 6 is 24i. And 4i times negative 4i is negative 16. And then I times I becomes I squared. Okay? One rule, I'm going to move my paper down so that I can write up here for you now, is I squared equals negative 1. This is something you're going to need to know for your test, because what we need to do is add together our i's here in the middle. Negative 24 plus 24 is 0. So you really just have the 36. And then I squared is negative 1. So this is really negative 16 times negative 1. That makes it plus 16. So this I squared just changes the sign and then it gets to go away. Because writing 16 instead of negative 16 I squared is much simpler. Then I can add 36 and 16, which makes 52. And there you have it. All right, let's do some more multiplying. Also, by the way, if you ever see something that has the same thing in the parentheses, just the sign in the middle is changed, that means that the 2 in the middle are going to cross out like this. That's called a conjugate. All right, here is something else you might want to write down on your note card. 4 minus 3i does not mean you square both of those numbers. It means you write 4 minus 3i times 4 minus 3i. Because when you square something, you have to multiply it by itself. Okay? Another good piece to have down on the note card if you decide to make one and use one. It is 2 sore points to use a note card on your test. Well worth the assistance, I promise you. All right. Same thing here, we just had to set it up the right way first. 4 times 4 is 16. 4 times negative 3i is negative 12i. And then we're going to take the negative 3i and multiply it by both of them. Negative 3i times 4 is negative 12i. And negative 3i times negative 3i. Negative 3 times negative 3 is 9. Positive 9. I times I is I squared. So take it one piece at a time. Multiply the regular numbers, then multiply the i's. Here in the middle, we're going to add our i's together. That makes negative 24i. The 16 drops down. And then this I squared should really be negative 1. So that makes that negative 9 at the end. And then add together your two constants. Constants are numbers without anything else with them. 16 minus 9 is 7. So your final answer is 7 minus 24i. All right, we've got 2 more left. These 2 are pretty basic. Okay, these 2 had something special. This one, the middle terms canceled out. This one you had to kind of expand first. These last 2 are very much straightforward. 7 times 8 is 56. 7 times 2i is 14i. Negative 3i times 8 is negative 24i. And negative 3i times 2i is negative 6i squared. Then we're going to go ahead and add together our i's in the middle. 14 minus 24 is negative 10. The 56 stays out front. And then this I squared turns into a negative 1, which makes this positive 6. 56 plus 6 is 62. The negative 10i stays. You are not allowed to add together 62 and negative 10i because one of them has an I and the other one does not. Think of the I like a variable. The only reason why it's not a variable is because it actually has a value. And that value is the square root of -1. All right, 5 times 2 is 10. 5 times 4i is 20i. Negative 3i times 2 is negative 6i. Negative 3i times 4i is negative 12i squared. These two in the middle add together. 20 minus 6 is 14i. Drop the 10 down. I squared is negative 1, which makes this negative 12, positive 12. 10 plus 12 is 22, plus 14i. All right. Simplifying each expression. I to the first is just I squared is negative 1, I to the third is negative I, and I to the fourth is 1. Again, maybe a good thing to put down on your note card. Then, what you're going to do is figure out which part of the pattern this is. So if I divide 27 by 4, I'm going to get 6.75, which means it goes in 6 times with a remainder of 3/4, or 3. So it's the same thing as I to the third, which is negative I. 33 divided by 4 is 8.25. That goes in 8 times with a remainder of 1 out of 4. So it's the same thing as I to the first, which is just I. Okay? These two, by the way, aren't too difficult to remember because I to the first is just I. I is I. I squared is negative 1. You should already know that from problems like these. So really the only two you have to be confused about are I to the third and I to the fourth. I to the third just adds a negative in front of the I, and I to the fourth is like this one times itself. So all the even powers don't have an I left when you simplify them. All right, I to the power of 46. 46 divided by 4 is 11.5. That is 2/4 that we have left over. So it's going to be the same thing as I squared, which is negative 1. 17 divided by 4 is 4.25. Again, that's 1/4, so it's the same thing as I. So the first, which is just I. And I to the 100. 100 divided by 4 is an even 25. No decimal at all, so it has a remainder of 0 or 4. And it's just equal to 1. All right, now let's talk about solving equations using square roots. What this means is that you are going to use the square root to cancel x squared. Okay, so for example, on this one, you need to make sure there's nothing out here or here, and there's not. So you're going to go straight to the square root. The other note that I'm going to add over there with that one is that now that cancels out that, so you just have x minus 5. But it equals the square root of negative 81. Well, the square root of 81 is 9. The negative just means you have an I with it. The square root of negative 81 is not negative 9. It is 9i. Okay? The other thing that I'm going to say over here is you have to add a plus and minus sign when you square root. So I square rooted both sides, so I added a plus minus right here. Sorry, forgot I hadn't written it yet. All right. And then if you wanted to get rid of this negative 5 over here by x, you're going to add it. But when we add it, we're going to put it in the front because we want the real parts to go first. So we have 5 plus 9i and 5 minus 9i as our two answers. We are simply just taking a shortcut of writing it together as this plus minus sign. And that is how you solve equations that have i's in them. You're going to end up with a negative under the square root. You just have to put an I with the answer to that square root. Some of the square roots, though, don't work out perfectly. For instance, this one. I'm going to move this 40 to the other side. It's being added. That means I need to subtract it. Then I need to divide by 2 on both sides. Now, nothing is left outside of the parentheses. That means that now it is my time to take the square root on both sides. That cancels this out and I get x plus 3 equals. I need to simplify this square root. Not only do I need there to be an I, but I need to change 20 into two things that multiply to 20, one of which is something that you can take the square root of. I am picking 4 times 5 because the square root of 4 is 2, which means the 5 has to stay underneath. So you're purposely picking a number that has a square root that goes into 20 so that you can do this. And now we have a smaller number left under the square root. Then we minus this 3. And don't forget, after you do that square root, plus minus. So our final answer is negative 3 plus or minus 2i squared root of 5. And we have one more. I'm going to add this 8 to the other side first. And I'm going to take the square root on both sides. But guess what? Nothing goes into 29, so I actually can't simplify it this time. Don't forget that plus and minus. And then I'm going to add that 7 to the other side. And look, that one didn't have a negative, so guess what? It doesn't have an I with it. These two had an I because we had to take the square root of a negative. That's the difference between regular answers and imaginary or complex answers, is they have an I. I'm going to pause here. This is the 3.6 review video. Tune in for the next two.